You're listening to the Ugly Truth Podcast with George and Christina Markoski, your weekly injection of science, insights, and myth-busting. For awesome info and trending content, go to theuglytruth.blog.
Hello and welcome back to Ugly Truth.
Welcome back.
Now we've got Rick Carter here with us, and Rick Carter, he's done a lot of amazing stuff.
So welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
He's quite well known in the startup community and the entrepreneur community here in Adelaide. Tell us a little bit about yourself quickly.
Well, I guess my headline is I help businesses of the present understand the future, and businesses of the future understand the present, because there's a bit of a gulf there. There's a lot of organisations these days that don't really know what artificial intelligence is, and 3D printing and machine learning and blockchain and all those kind of things that are going to change their world very soon. Likewise, there's a lot of startup companies that don't understand things like customers and credibility and capital. And so what I'm trying to do is maybe get the two of them together. It's kind of a bit like Tinder for business, introducing the new guys to the old guys.
Oh, wow.
I like that analogy, yeah.
Tinder for business.
So, yeah, that's really where I come from. And that puts me across a whole bunch of new and exciting things that are happening. I'm part of a business that's launching in China soon. We've got 2 media companies that we're working with in China, and that's about taking international brands into China, whether that be by whatever medium. It might be personal introductions, it might be access to large format digital screens, it might be access to internet television. So, yeah, we're doing a number of things, all about, I think, trying to get Australian businesses more enabled into the world. And I guess one of my big concerns, which is where we'll touch on when we start talking about blockchain a little bit, is that Australian businesses and Western businesses in general, I think, are going to get left behind by developing countries who don't have the rules and regulations. They don't have to unlearn the stuff that we've got embedded into us. They're actually progressing much faster in many of those ways than we are, which is a bit of a concern.
Okay, yes. So today we're going to talk about blockchain. So I guess in the media recently, there's been a lot about Bitcoin. Bitcoin's been in the headlines, and I've sort of a long time ago, I remember there was a little app you could put on your computer to mine Bitcoins, because Bitcoins are prime numbers, and there's certain algorithms you need to create to solve an equation, and then you've got a Bitcoin, which is fascinating. And I remember when they were really cheap. They're like a couple $100 each. And there was a guy in New Zealand, and he had mined some Bitcoins on his laptop and then dumped it. And then Bitcoins went up. And his laptop was worth, what was it, like $6 or $7 million, and it was in a dump, and he was going through the dump looking for his laptop because
I don't blame you.
Right. But that was back in the days when Bitcoin went up to 500, and his computer's worth that much, and then suddenly now it's hit, what is it,
5,000
US. Like, that's a really high ceiling. It's huge. Not ceiling, I shouldn't say ceiling, a peak. And where is it going to go? Because I think a lot of people are interested. Do we invest? Don't we invest? There's not just Bitcoins, other coins. Can you tell us a little bit about this?
Well, I guess it's like any other investment. You need to understand it. And if you're just going to jump in on the basis you might make money, you probably won't. I guess you need to read the trends. They, like property, it will go up and it'll dip. It'll go up and it'll dip.
Absolutely.
But the trend, like I've got some notes here, it was $7 6 years ago, is now $5,000.
Wow.
I don't know of any other investment that's quite gone up like that, although I did do some research. IBM went up 958% in its first 5 years. So if you'd have bought shares in IBM way back, Salesforce went up 20 times in value. So there have been traditional companies have done this, but nothing like...
I imagine Apple computers would have been quite similar as well.
Absolutely. But these guys that are going, 20,000%, 30,000% increase. I guess when people say, is it a safe and a secure investment? I liken it to gold. Bitcoin is digital gold. people ask me, well, how does Bitcoin get created? And I go, well, how did gold get created? I mean, it doesn't really matter. It's now established as being a secure, tradable medium. And as long as it maintains that status, which it always will, it'll continue to rise, albeit maybe slowly in future, but it will always be a good investment. I mean, it's kind of described by some people as a way to invest their money outside the traditional financial systems and be somewhat protected, because we saw what the traditional financial systems did during the GFC. They didn't do too well.
No, what happened to Bitcoin during the GFC?
It hadn't been invented.
Sorry?
Hadn't been invented.
Oh, okay, there you go. Hadn't been invented. So
nothing.
That in fact was one of the spurs that brought along. Bitcoin really...
Because there was like a need for it, like that niche.
Well, a lot of people liken Bitcoin to Silk Road and the dark web and drug dealers and all that sort of stuff. You know what I mean?
So they paint it in a bad picture.
You think
a bit like cash at the Commonwealth Bank, that kind of thing.
Oh, yeah. So, you know, a lot... the funny thing is, it's interesting how... You know, people started bartering first, and then they started using gold, and then they started using coins, and then we invented paper, and now it's completely disappeared, and all it is a number.
Yeah.
Like, we totally dematerialise money and wealth with Bitcoin.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's the value we place upon it.
Yes. But, I mean, even with a coin, you've got a coin there, you know what I mean? Now, you just got nothing there. And, you know, how do you know it's going to be safe and someone's not going to hack into your computer and take your Bitcoin? Or there's a few other currencies now that are doing very well as well, isn't there? The thing is, there's so many currencies out there that are crypto-based and blockchain, and I mean, which ones are going to work, which ones aren't, because not all of them are going to work. It's a bit like back in the 90s, you had all these websites, and some of them, like Amazon, did really well, and then others we probably don't even know they're not around anymore.
I mean, Amazon's a good point. If you'd have invested in Amazon way back then, you'd be a very, very wealthy man today.
Oh, totally.
And a lot of people now would say the blockchain world is the internet circa 1995, 1996. It's that young in terms of where it might go.
It's really young.
So getting knowledge of it, and people talk about, you know, futures for their kids and whatever. And I say, well, teach them to program and understand Ethereum and some of those, I call it a language, not really a language, but some of those platforms of the internet, because we're in the very, very early days. And you talk about security. The reason Bitcoin is growing in value and the blockchain grows in value is they are all about security. They are all about placing security at the highest level, and it's because it maintains its security, it continues to grow in value. So let me explain how I think the simple man's layman's term of blockchain and Bitcoin in terms of the value. It's like the bank in the city puts all its gold in the vault, and all I've ever got to do is crack the vault. Simple. In my new city, I'm the bank, and I distribute all the gold into all the houses in the city. And as the houses are built, a little bit of gold goes into each of those houses. So if I want to get all the gold of the city to crack the vault, I've got to get the key to every single house in the city. And once I've done that, I've unlocked the vault. The trouble is, as soon as I get the keys to every house in the city, someone's built another 10 houses. I've got to crack them. And that's what the blockchain is. It's continually growing and appending value to it as it moves. Every 10 minutes or so, something else gets added to it. And so therefore, companies that are putting their information into silos, whether it be in the cloud or on a server or whatever, they're spending a fortune protecting them.
Yes.
Whereas once things are on the blockchain,
you don't have to spend that money.
You don't have to spend the money on it because it's distributed everywhere. You can't actually access it in one fell swoop.
So basically, so what you're saying with blockchain, you can actually store information in blockchain and it's secure.
Correct.
You're not going to get hacked.
Correct.
I mean, there was a place in Japan that got hacked, a Bitcoin exchange.
Well, I think that was more, from what I've read, there was a programming error in somewhere.
Oh, right, yep.
That someone managed to exploit.
So it's not infallible.
You know, well, pretty much it is.
It is now.
Has been infallible. That nobody's really hacked into Bitcoin per se, because it takes so many people. Explaining the technology of it is something I can't do, because sitting down trying to work it out does your head in. The point is that it is there and it does have a value, and it does continue to increase in value, which is why I liken it to gold. You know, we don't know how to make gold.
Instead of digging it, You mine it
Yeah,
online. Now, there's a lot of farms mining it in China, and now it'd be really worthwhile because, I mean, I remember when it was around $700, and a lot of people looking at mining it, and you look at the electricity price, especially in Adelaide,
Correct.
it just wasn't worth it. But now, it's certainly worth it, but it's harder to mine now than it used to be. But for 5,000 US, that's good money. Now, these people, they're mining heaps of Bitcoin. They're going to massive farms.
Yep.
How do they affect the market? Because they dump their money, because they probably wait till it goes up and then dump the whole lot
Yeah,
to
correct.
cash in. And that's when Bitcoin drops, doesn't it?
But I guess it's, it's a bit like the stock market. It's a bit like foreign exchange. It's a bit like all of those markets where futures trading in particular, it's a matter of the way the people choose to go to make those changes. But you're not relying on one or two individuals. It's so widespread as to how you can influence it. And as you say, the amount of computing power required to do this and to make these small changes is quite massive. But I think blockchain's got a hell of a lot more to offer than the currency thing. The currency is maybe a tip of the iceberg. Yeah. Blockchain will revolutionise the world. And that will happen in particular when everybody is connected to the internet. And everybody in the world has a smartphone. And now pretty well, most people in the world have got access to some kind of smartphone. Meanwhile, 38% of the world don't have a bank account.
Wow.
So this is the point at which banks get left behind, that we start to trade money, move money around the world, and we don't actually need a bank in the middle. Because what was the bank established to do? They're a trust broker. So gradually, with this kind of abilities, we start to get the middleman out.
We're going to dematerialise banks because, I mean, I suppose technology's done that already in a lot of places like Africa where they don't need a power station anymore.
Yep.
They don't need phone companies and phone lines, and people are going direct, getting their own power and getting mobile phones.
Yes, correct.
And I think the rest of the world now, that old technology of banking, phone lines, electricity, power generation, it's not going to happen, is it? They're going to go direct.
Which is why a lot of the emerging world will jump ahead of us in the innovation stakes, because they don't have the regulations, they don't have to unlearn the stuff that we've been had hammered into us over the years. They're moving ahead in lots of ways really rapidly. The things they lack, there's something like 2 or 3 billion people in the world who have no formal identity. They were born without birth certificates, etc., etc.
Wow.
Right, because
They're going to get
illegal immigrants or something. Like
well,
that.
yes, just people in Africa who there is no system. They have property titles, no such thing in many parts of the world. If the government decides they're going to have your farm, they just come along and take it, and you can't prove that you ever owned it.
Yeah, see, property rights is what really made England so powerful. And I think once the third world has property rights, it's going to become more prosperous. Because without property rights, there's no investment. Because if you're going to invest money and the government's going to take it off you, what's the point? But once you've got property rights, then you've got more investment, more trust, and the economy grows. Probably one of the fundamentals of having a strong economy.
Well, that's what the blockchain can do. It can establish a value. Let's take a person. So I'm born with no identity. However, with blockchain, there are certain attributes of me that can form my block. Where was I born? When was I born? What colour are my eyes? Who's my mother? And I make up a whole bunch of things about me that make me 100% unique. So I now have a digital identity.
Yep.
And when I do a transaction with you, George, for example, you have a digital identity. So we know who each other are. We are unique. We're the only two people who can do this transaction.
So is this going to stop digital fraud? You know, when people, identity theft, because let's face it, so many people will get caught by that, where people steal your identity and use it with your credit card and stuff. You won't be able to do that with blockchain.
Correct.
There's one other concern though. I mean, if all of us got this blockchain, like a super fingerprint, which is even more powerful than a fingerprint in DNA, and every single person's got this little blockchain, you know, what if there's a world government keeping an eye on everyone and there's no privacy and they know exactly what you're doing, where you are, everything about you? I mean, isn't that a bit scary? Isn't it a bit 1984, a bit Orwellian?
But I don't think they do, because there are so many aspects of it. The ability to keep tabs on all of that, because as your block engages with someone else's block and forms a chain, then that's changed the relationship. So there's another aspect of you has changed. For example, I lend you some money. You could be in Africa and I've never met you, but you've got a good cause and you need some money to do something. We establish a smart contract which says if I lend you $1,000 and you haven't paid it back by a particular date, then I take over some asset you own, which also has another block.
Oh, so that way you don't have to worry about court or anything.
Correct.
Because it's already there. It's like computer programming. If, then, done.
Correct.
Wow.
So it's like it's establishing
Bitcoin's gonna
trust.
Stop a lot of fraud.
Yes.
And what about getting loans, like a loan for a house?
Well, you can take a bank out of the equation and you'll be able to do a deal with someone, a private investor who's got $100,000 spare and you need to borrow $100,000. You do a deal without the bank, potentially.
And you would negotiate your own interest rate and things like that. So
Correct.
it's going to democratise money,
There'll
essentially.
probably be a big market, like eBay or something, where people are going, okay, we'll give you this much interest rate, and you're going to go for the best deal. So it's going to move up and down depending on the world demand, correct?
And
Well-
it'll be competitive as well.
But then you'll probably have a market of people that verify that you're good. So you still need a credit rating system.
But look at it from a
You know what I mean?
global perspective.
Yep.
The credit system is a big issue because millions of people around the world do not have a credit history.
They don't at all.
And if you don't have a credit history, you can't borrow money.
No.
So we take a whole bunch of people out of the equation. So with blockchain and with digital identity, et cetera, you can overcome that because you can, and then also, cross-border credit. I might have good credit in Australia and I go to America and I've got no track record, so bad like you can't do anything here.
So with this, the world's going to become smaller. It's going to become more international, which is pretty exciting. We still need some sort of way of knowing if you're good or bad, because people will try to buck the system. Because that's why eBay works so well, because you've got feedback.
Yes.
If you've got feedback on your blockchain, could be interesting because you can have a really high rating blockchain and get certain privileges, and without that, so it's an interesting sort of status symbol for different things throughout the world, isn't it?
But it will cover so many things. Our blockchain factory, which we're launching in Adelaide next month.
Yeah, tell me about this blockchain factory.
Is
that like a farm?
Well,
It's a
no,
factory. It's not a farm.
It's more like a co-working space.
Yep.
Really. So we're offering a space for people who want to work in the blockchain to work out of our building and pay the kind of rent that you pay to be in a co-working space, except we as an organisation will look to monetise opportunities in the blockchain. We've already got, we are building alliances with the universities in Adelaide who are full of people who've got the credibility and the capability to do all the things in the blockchain, but they don't have the capacity to bring in projects or commercialise them. So we sit around that of finding projects, taking the fruition and then monetising them.
That sounds pretty exciting.
Well, I think we've got 4 on the go potentially at the moment. One is in the agriculture business, and that's a really good example of what the blockchain can do. You think about a farmer who grows grain, and there's actually a company in Australia that's doing this, AgriDigital in Sydney. Grows the grain, maybe doesn't get paid until the grain's turned into bread. Along the way, there are a whole bunch of people in that process. One of them doesn't pay, one of them goes broke, one of them disappears, the farmer ends up missing out. So in the blockchain world, it could well be that his grain leaves his farm, it goes to the weighbridge. The weighbridge is a block on the chain. It's a certified weighbridge. We know it's there and it works. His grain gets weighed, he gets paid because the contract was to just get to that point. The guy who's paid for it there, he takes it to the next stage, and the next stage, and the next stage, and at the end, everybody has got their piece of value as it's gone because their value is being appended to their part of the chain. So I think that's a good example of how it might work with smart contracts. You then look at wine. Someone once told me that they met a guy in China who was the international marketing director for Chivas Regal. And I don't know the exact numbers, but I think he said that they sold 70 million bottles a year in China, the company. But they also knew that there were about 150 million bottles that were being sold.
Yeah, so
Heaps of counterfeit.
China especially, there's counterfeiting everything. Apparently they counterfeited the Ferrari too.
Oh, probably.
Can you tell the difference?
I haven't seen it, so I don't know. I don't know much about Ferraris,
Yeah.
so probably not. But so So the blockchain stopped counterfeiting.
Well, then you are able to trace back by, it might be a hologram, it might be some kind of mark or whatever in the bottle. You can then trace it back to its actual origins. So that whole authentication is another aspect of blockchain to look at.
Which will
there
change
might be
things a
something
lot.
there might be a chip in the cap of the bottle that
Right,
identifies
yeah.
it, and you're able to scan it.
Yeah, because the thing is, I suppose, a lot of people buy status symbols, and that's why they pay money for certain brands. But then you buy the cheap one, but you still get the status symbol if you get high enough quality. Right? And now this is going to destroy the status symbol because it doesn't matter if it looks the same, it hasn't got the blockchain.
Yep.
That could be the next level because being authentic, I wonder if the blockchain could help somewhere with fake news and stuff like that.
Well, there are aspects of it in the content advertising world where if I publish some content on someone's page and someone's prepared to advertise on it, then I get some of that revenue because it's then appended to what I do. So there is no reason that you can't. I mean, basically, it's like any technology. If you can find a reason and a way, then it can be applied to what you do. We're working in some projects that are, one is in the virtual reality space of building coins that would run with a virtual reality program. Can't say much more about that. And another one is around a program in the US where they're using artificial intelligence to predict childhood cancer way, way, way before any signs of it.
Wow.
And a blockchain process will run through that. So
I don't get why the blockchain's going to help this AI. How is that going to work?
it will help their business in terms of the analysis. So, for example, they're going to use a whole bunch of researchers around the world to do various aspects of the program. So the different researchers will be paid based on their contribution to the end result. So as the result moves through the process, they're accruing time, they're accruing coins, etc., for the work they're doing. So it's a way of monetising a project, I guess.
It's amazing what you can monetize these days.
Well, basically, once everything becomes digital, you can monetize anything, and that's the world we're moving.
You can
to,
actually
where everything-
monetize your DNA at the moment. So now what you can do, you do a DNA test and you send it off to a company, and then they farm it out to different pharmaceutical companies, and you get paid every time they use it in a study.
Okay, interesting.
Interesting, hey?
Yeah.
Your DNA, like.
That is
Well,
interesting.
I saw a guy at a conference last week. He's gone beyond the being able to read the genome. They are now able to write it. They're starting to write
Is that with CRISPR or stuff?
new
Or
genetic. I think that
Wow.
it's amazing stuff. Like,
Technology has come a long way, hasn't it?
so, I don't know if you listened to our podcast on AI that we did, but
no, I didn't.
yeah, we talk about a lot of this stuff because the world is just changing so fast.
Dematerialising,
and
yeah.
you know,
Well, there's some people in Adelaide doing some of this. Dr. Michelle Paragini, you should get her on your podcast one day.
okay,
Michelle is doing big things with her business, Life Whisperer, and Life Whisperer is analysing embryos in the IVF program to predict which are the embryos that are most likely to survive
Wow.
for the process, etc., etc. She's establishing international acclaim out of that, and that's happening, right here in Adelaide, out of SAMRI.
yeah, because I mean, Adelaide's been quiet for a while, and then suddenly I hear this stuff
been
about
put
it.
on the map, I think, by Elon Musk in
Well,
particular.
well, the funny thing is, I didn't realise, but Adelaide's quite big in the space industry. There was a big conference recently.
Correct.
Did you go to that
I
conference?
did indeed.
I thought you would have.
I did indeed. In fact, another young lady in Adelaide is playing a big role there. Flavia Tartini. She's an Italian rocket scientist, married an Adelaide guy when she was working on the Mars project in Brussels, I think it was. He wanted to come back to Adelaide when they were going to start a family. She agreed that she'd come along. She got to Adelaide and discovered there was no space industry in South Australia. So she thought, what the hell will I do? I'll create one.
Really?
So
Wow.
she started a business called Fleet Space. And Fleet Space will launch, I think, over the next 2 years, 400 mini satellites. They're about the size of a shoebox. And they will link up and provide a web around the world for the internet because there's something like, I don't know, 90% of the world has no internet
And
coverage.
So pretty soon you'd be on Mount Everest you'll be able to watch a video on Mount Everest in the middle of the desert. You think about it, because if you got lost in the old days and you had a camel and nothing, all you could do was write a big SOS. But now, if you've got a device, you can actually communicate anywhere. It's pretty amazing.
Well, that's
So the
going to
good
blow
news-
the NBN out of the water as well.
Oh, absolutely. Wow.
Well,
It's just miles ahead.
Christina, with the Australian NBN, I think smoke signals blown out of the water.
Well, I've got to get a plug in here for my friends at Unity Air.
They're excellent.
I use Unity. I mean, those guys, if they're listening, they came to me and pitched their idea 3 or 4 years ago, and I said, "I'll never take off. You'll never get anywhere. You know, how can you possibly compete with the telcos?" Fantastic system. As long as you've got a line of sight to one of their towers, the speed is as good as the NBN.
I use Unity, and they're excellent.
Yeah,
I must say.
And
I get like 50 megabits per second download.
Well, in Adelaide now we've got Gig City, which is rolling out internet speeds 100 times what you're going to get on the NBN, but it's only for
it's certain businesses, yeah. But that's really it's about time. I think it's pretty exciting to be in Adelaide at the moment. There's so many exciting things. I also saw an article that Adelaide have hit South Australia's hit the milestone of we use 48% of our energy is actually solar.
Well, it's another whole industry here that can be created. And
now we're going to have the biggest battery in the world.
Well, a friend of mine is working very hard at getting the E-Challenge racing here, which is the Formula E, which is electric-powered Grand Prix racing cars, trying to get that into Adelaide.
Wow.
That'd be pretty quick, wouldn't they?
Oh, they're as quick.
Yep.
Yeah.
They're as
hardly
quick.
any moving parts, so you don't need to spend millions on getting it.
And not as noisy.
Well, and there's another challenge of the future, you know, that people and the RAA won't mind me talking about it because they've got a significant innovation division within their business because they're getting to the stage now when cars break down, all they can do is put them on a truck and take them off to a computer expert because, you know, basically you're driving an iPhone with wheels.
Yep.
And it will be increasingly so. And as they become more electric...
So I'd love to get a self-driving car. But the thing is, I mean, we've still got a massive import duty on luxury cars in Australia, even though we don't have an industry to protect, which is crazy.
Yep.
Like...
Well, I don't think driverless cars will be far away. I'm very privileged to do some work with Carnegie Mellon University, and we believe we're the world leader in driverless vehicle technology. We do all of the work for General Motors. We started Uber's driverless program.
Yep.
Carnegie Mellon's had a driverless vehicle project for 30 years.
Wow.
This isn't new technology.
Because you hear about Tesla, and these guys have never heard of them. Are they as good or bigger or smaller, or why have we heard of them?
I think Tesla are a very good marketing organisation. I think Musk is very good at getting the brand out there.
Yeah.
I mean, you'll find very soon that all of the major motor manufacturers will have some kind of program in terms of both driverless and in terms of electric. General Motors,
everyone, even Porsche making a electric car, which I'm happy with.
They have to.
So I thought I'd have to get rid of the
get
Porsche.
into that bit of the market because
well,
it's
that is the
taking off.
market. That is the market now. That's it. So
absolutely. They've got to evolve, otherwise they'll be left behind.
Correct.
Well, the funny
Going
thing
back
is...
to the Bitcoin that we were talking about.
I did digress.
That's okay. How did it all become a thing? Like, how did it even get started as a concept? And why has it only become, you know, quite a hot topic recently? Is that because it's just gone up?
Oh, I think so.
Bit?
I think so. I mean, the mainstream media,
the
mainstream media had a focus on the bad news for as long as they could, which is what they like to do. They like to try and suppress things until they can catch up. And they're a bit like governments, you know. Let's suppress it and say it's bad until we work out what it is, and when we work out it's okay, then we'll talk good stuff about it.
Yep.
It's this aspect of security that's driving it up and driving the value of it. That it's providing, you know, every day. Blockchain networks, Bitcoin, or whatever, becomes more secure because every time there's a transaction, there's a bit added to it, and therefore it gets harder to crack. And then there's another bit. So every few minutes, the Bitcoin network, if you like, becomes more secure.
Doesn't that slow it down though?
No, not really, because
I've heard Bitcoin is a little bit slow when you do a transaction, or. Okay, I've heard that a lot of experts are saying Bitcoin could go up to $100,000 US.
Is that right? Well, again, it's only 5,000
What are your thoughts
at the
on
moment. You know, the aspects of the blockchain that interest me more are the business drivers of value as opposed to the speculation of the currency. Like, I'm more interested in Ethereum as a platform rather than the Bitcoin platform because Ethereum has that ability to do the smart contracts, do the identification.
Is Ethereum a coin?
It has its currency called Ether.
Yep.
And there are a number of other currencies around out there. I mean, and one of the other things people are doing now is using the coin concept to generate funding for projects up front. I kind of call it the reverse of the IPO in the stock market. So generally you get your company to a point where you need a big investment, so you float on the stock market with an IPO. You then bring in a lot of money.
Yep.
What's happening now is people are getting startup businesses and they're issuing a coin, the ICO, the international coin, the initial coin offering.
Okay.
So they establish a value of their business even though it's got no value from the point of view of trading. So I'm speculating on a startup business by buying coins, and as the business grows, the value of my coins grows. So it's, as I say, it's kind of reverse of the stock market.
So it's a bit like a share, but instead of a share, it's a coin that's got a blockchain.
Correct.
What's the advantage of having a coin instead of a share?
Oh, well,
For the investor.
Well, the share market will never issue shares in a startup company that has got no track record.
All right. Oh, and also I suppose
That's the problem.
you don't have the transactions, do you?
No.
Because let's face it, every time you buy shares and sell shares, you have to pay. Mm-hmm. But with
Well, that's starting to change as well. The Australian Stock Exchange has been on a blockchain path for some time, and eventually, maybe sooner rather than later, there will be a blockchain version of the stock market.
all right, so the blockchain is going to affect the stock market as well. So is that going to affect brokers?
Oh, I suspect so.
Because you're not going to need a broker very much longer, are you?
I mean, the friends of mine out there are brokers in various industries. I'd be suggesting perhaps you look around for another job, guys. And it's not so much look around for another job; it's about the value add.
Yes.
You know,
yes.
and if you're in the
Exactly.
chain and you're adding value, you're going to make money. If you're in the chain and you don't add any value, well, you'll get bypassed.
That's a good thing, though, because I think at the end of the day, with all technology, it's creating more value for less effort. You know what I mean?
Well, I'll bring it back to the emerging world and entrepreneuring people, of which there are millions out there who are currently locked out because they don't have identity, they don't have bank accounts, they don't have access to credit. They've probably got really good ideas, so they could be getting money into their investments in a safe and secure way, because people say, oh, you know, I wouldn't invest in things in Africa because it's this, that and the other. Well, now there's a way to invest in projects in Africa, for example, with people that have previously had no identity in a much safer way.
That's awesome.
The other thing that a lot of people talk about it, as we touched on a little while ago, of being used by criminal networks, etc., etc. Well, the authorities think blockchain is great because criminals who are silly enough to use it are going to be very traceable. You're going to be able to trace back through the blockchain. You literally will be able to follow the money.
Okay,
So the bad PR about people saying, you know, oh, people are going to use it to buy drugs online on the Silk Road and everything like
but
that.
they are.
They have been, and they will.
And but Bitcoin is still anonymous compared to a bank. Mm-hmm. And if someone wanted to go to dark web and buy something illicit, Bitcoin is
would be
a more anonymous way of doing
currency
it.
of choice almost. Yeah.
The difference this time round is the authorities, the polices around the world have been learning this from the ground up now, as opposed with the internet, they caught on way too late.
Yeah.
So they're now part of the process, so they have the tools and the abilities, I believe, to be able to follow and analyse these kind of transactions, which will make it more secure. I come back to my throwaway point before about the Commonwealth Bank. I mean, that was millions and millions and millions of dollars being laundered via cash. So when people say, oh, this is being used for criminal activities, well, cash has been used by criminals for a very, very, very long time
For
to
a lot
launder
longer,
money.
Yes.
And will continue to be.
And they'll find a different way if it doesn't work that way anyway.
Well, we talk about the
course.
autonomy of the anonymous nature of Bitcoin. Cash is pretty anonymous.
It's a lot more anonymous than
Absolutely.
It's moved
Bitcoin.
from me to you.
Yeah.
That's it. No,
You
you're
can't prove I ever had it.
No, true. So you're right. It's a lot more anonymous than that sort of stuff.
And with currency, the cryptocurrency, I'd say it's still fairly unknown by a lot of people.
No one even knows how to buy it, Christina.
correct.
I don't know how to buy it. I wanted to buy Bitcoin the other day and I was like, how do I even get started? I've got no idea. So how are people supposed to, I guess, trust in something that they don't know about, for one, they can't just walk into a store and pay with Bitcoin. Like, how are you going to do that? So how is the whole thing going to, you know, get more substantial? Are shops going to start taking Bitcoin on board, and you, in the future, you're going to walk up to the counter with like a card and it's going to have your Bitcoins on it?
You'll probably
You're
have
gonna
a
pay
mobile
for
phone.
something.
An app.
It'll be your phone.
It'll be your
But
phone.
how
on
do
your
people
phone.
even get started? Like, and there's just so many other different types of cryptocurrencies. What's the best one to buy? Is Bitcoin a bubble? People are saying, you know, it's at the top of the market now. Is a bad time to get in. What are your thoughts on those sorts of questions?
Well, I think once again, at the moment, there is a role for brokers in that world who follow the world, understand
Right.
the world, study it, that can give you that advice.
So you could be like a Bitcoin broker.
Well, one of the things the Blockchain Factory is going to offer is certified training
Right.
in blockchain, so that businesses can come and learn how they might apply it to their business, how individuals can learn what this thing's all about. And there are various other services. I mean, if you want to learn about blockchain and Bitcoin training, whatever, just bail up a university student. I'm pretty sure they're all trading on it every day, every night, and that's how. And I think the old, odd job of the university student's been replaced by trading Bitcoin at night. I mean, all the ones I know are into it in some way, shape, or form.
How is there's a lot of companies now that are trying to create quantum computers, and they've had a certain amount of success. How's that going to affect the blockchain? Because obviously, part of the security of the blockchain is you can't solve those questions with a normal computer, but quantum computers will probably be able to do it very easily.
Well, I don't know about very easy, because once again, it's this notion, I go back to my analogy of the town, that as soon as you find the keys to all the houses in that town, you suddenly realise that there's another 20 houses being built, so we've got to get into them. So I get the keys to all of that town, and then suddenly this town's linked up to another one. The notion of they're saying the reason Bitcoin and whatever goes up in value is as it becomes more secure, it becomes more valuable. A bit like gold.
That's interesting.
A bit like gold. The less gold, we're not making too much more gold, so the value of gold keeps going up.
Interesting. That's a very fascinating way to look at it.
And the other way I explain blockchain, the simple way of establishing blockchain, I pick up a book, I don't turn to a page in the middle and start reading it, because it doesn't make any sense until I've read the previous page. And that doesn't make any sense until I read the previous page. And the book doesn't really tell the story until I get to the end. So the book's like a blockchain. Each chapter is a block. Once I've read that block, I'm then interested to link up to the next block and the next block and the next block. And at the end, I've got a blockchain. So that's a simple way of kind of understanding how the value gets added. As I read each page, the books become more valuable to me. If the book's not becoming more valuable to me, I close it and I walk away, because that book was of no value and it wasn't interesting to me. And the person who wrote the book won't get paid because the books stop selling, because there is no value. It's a value chain, and it's a security chain that each page is linked inexplicably to the next page. And then the open ledger nature of it allows me to add a next page, until I decide, as the author of the book, it's done.
Okay.
And then I come along with my next blockchain, which is a sequel. And I do it all over again. And I've established value in my next book because the first book had value. So I build a link between the two. The music industry is another no-brainer for blockchain, because these days someone writes a hit song, and because it goes out digitally and it gets ripped off here, there and everywhere, people make very little money out of music anymore. Whereas once upon a time,
it's very hard to make
you
money.
write a hit song, you'd make an awful lot of money. Now with blockchain, it's going to be distributed on a blockchain. So the original composer, they're going to get their value. The original artist, other artists who perform it, etc., etc. So as that piece of, let's call it content, moves along a blockchain, it increases in value, and every participant in the chain gets increasing value. So the original composer, it would be established that every time it's been performed by another artist, every time, they're making money. Whereas now, they digitise it once, they get one payment, thank you very much, see you later. So that, it's really going to be people sitting down and working out a value chain around whatever it is they do, and how can they benefit by producing this blockchain, which is once again, what we're trying to do with the Blockchain Factory is just educate people as to what it is and then send the way to think about it. In the early days of social media, my daughter and I, my daughter was my business partner at the time, we wrote an e-book called The Grumpy Old Manager's Guide to Social Media Marketing 10 years ago to educate people that we worked with in what this social media thing was. And we did it by comparing their interests in life. So if I'm interested in fishing or cooking or travelling, the book talked about going off into the internet and to Facebook and whatever, and joining groups that were relevant to what I enjoy. Because then, having read about how I enjoy it and what it is, I can then apply it to my business. If you sit down with a business person and go, well, you've got to learn all this new technology and whatever to move forward, you won't get there. And I think the key thing in business these days, the old days where the guy who runs the business doesn't need to know about technology because he's got a department or an expert or whatever. You've got to forget that. If you're running a business and you don't get technology, you might as well get the hell out of there because you're in serious trouble.
Really? Okay.
And you don't even know you're in serious trouble yet. You really need to understand the technology. And I think in terms of technology, whether it be Bitcoin, blockchain or whatever, bringing in the experts when you need the experts. You know, it's the old story that it's not important to know the answers, it's important to know the questions. So you guys are asking questions and I'm able to come back and say, look, I don't know the answer to that, but I know someone who does.
Yeah.
And I think increasingly in future, we're not going to be able to absorb all the information that's out there.
No,
I mean, it's impossible to do.
No.
What's very important to do is to know who to go to.
Absolutely.
Which
You've
is
got to
why-
go to the right specialists for the right
Well, we've
area and
kind of
topic.
in Adelaide got a huge advantage. The 20-minute city, the 1 degree of separation, it's really easy to get to where you want quickly. We've got a little group that we've it developed out of nowhere. We're calling it the South Australian Way. We had to put an event together in no time flat, in like about 24 hours. We had to get the right people together, have a discussion about something and make it happen. And we sat down afterwards and said, you couldn't do that in any other city, probably in the world. A city the size of Adelaide where everybody is so well connected that, you know, I can easily ask someone I know who's an expert in so-and-so. And not only will they tell me who it is, I will get an introduction to someone that they know and trust and therefore I know and trust.
Yep.
It brings
Makes
us
it
back
very
to the
easy.
blockchain.
It's like
and
a blockchain, but a city.
Correct.
And personal. Yep.
I mean, the world is going to move to be, which will be fantastic, to one where we're doing things based on trust. And at the moment, we're devoid of it in much of what we do.
So having more trust in the world is a good thing. How is the blockchain going to affect the Internet of Things, which is apparently supposed to be the new big thing as well?
Well, I guess once again, that going back to my rocket scientist Flavia Nardini, her concept of a web that covers the world is very much to facilitate the Internet of Things. Like they're saying, within 5 years there will be 70 billion things that can be connected to the internet.
Wow.
Sensors, sheep, everything. Possibly people. I went to a conference recently with a guy who's got all the chips embedded in his arm for all manner of things. So blockchain, once again, it's just transactions. You know, it's understanding what those transactions and where and how they operate. So Flavia, with her business, is launching the satellites, but she's also out talking to farmers about buying her very simple modem, sits in the middle of their farm. It links up all the sensors on the farm so they know where to water, where to fertilise, where the sheep go to feed. And then from there, we're really, that's the blockchain goes back to the field in which the grain was grown. We'll know the quality of the soil.
Wow.
And one of the problems they talk about these days is, you know, I think we all know a big part of global warming has to do with all the rubbish that we've put into the soil and killed the bioavailability of a lot of the nutrients in the soil. So we'll be able to know what kind of soil the grain was grown and that we're eating.
So you're saying if you buy something in the shop, you'll be able to tell if it's really organic and, you know, did they look after this chicken or was
Correct.
it this chicken? You know what I mean?
Correct.
That's important. You know, a lot of people want ethical food and organic food, but at the moment we don't know. All we've got is
you'll be able to scan the
telling
product
us.
and bring up a video of what a free-range chicken looks like, and
Yes.
you'll realise that they're
that's
not all
awesome.
running around the farm happy
Yeah.
little chickens. They're just in a slightly bigger cage than the ones that are caged.
Exactly.
So those kind of things. Yes,
So
ethical, I think, is a word.
So it's got to create more transparency.
Correct.
So I think transparency is very important in the
Yep.
world, and this is going to do that. Will the blockchain create more privacy or less privacy? That's the question.
Well, there are public blockchains and there are private blockchains. So the simple answer to that is both. And it will depend on what you want. Privacy, that people say, oh, I give up my privacy for so-and-so. Well, there's always generally a trade-off. The more information I give to Facebook, for example, the more advertising and content comes to me that I'm interested in. If I don't tell Facebook anything, I'm still getting ads that have got no relevance to me. So, there is a trade-off. But yes, there is a big threat in the world, I guess, and there is probably capitalism is under threat in many ways in that data is the new oil. And there are very few companies in the world now who are amassing all that data. You think of the data that Google and Facebook and those companies have got, they pretty well got all they need on everybody they need to have it on. So that's a real challenge to the future.
So data is the new oil.
Absolutely.
Because everyone talks about big data and things like that and what you can do with it. I saw an article recently that said that, Facebook or Google could probably swing an election.
Oh, absolutely.
If they wanted to. That's a lot of power. Right.
Well, that's why I say, democracy is under threat because of the amount of data certain organisations have got.
Yes, so can we use technology and blockchain to create a better democracy? Or is it under threat and we're going to...
Well, I guess you've got people like Musk and Gates and others that are actually concerned about it. And that's a really big question, but there are a lot of people out there that do have that concern. They've got the concern about robotics or whatever. My theory is in all of this, with all of these bits of technology, I honestly believe we're at the start of the greatest job creation period in the history of the world. We just don't know what, where, when and who. But we'll figure it out.
Okay, I'm curious about that because we recently did a podcast and saying you're going to lose your job.
Lose their jobs.
And the thing is,
you're going to change your job.
Like we know that 100 years ago, over 95% of people were in agriculture, and then they brought in the Industrial Revolution, and now we've got 1% in Australia in agriculture, and they're doing other jobs.
Correct.
However, once we've got artificial intelligence, right? And slowly, because if you believe in artificial intelligence is going to happen, and they're going to advance a lot quicker than humans, slowly they're going to be better at everything and cheaper than everything than us. Everything. So
no, not everything. There's a lot of things humans can do that robots and artificial intelligence will
not at the moment.
Never do, but for a very long time they won't be able to do.
But it's an accelerating thing, and sooner or later, like for example, lawyers, for example, it's a classic, or specialists.
But they've never done much anyway.
Fair enough. But I mean, with lawyers, they've got programs now that do really good law.
Oh, absolutely.
They've got, but you've obviously got, you still need to be a front man and engage people. They've got, now, you were talking about childhood cancer, but they've also got, looking at x-rays and data. A computer could do a much better job of predicting cancer or disease than a human can. So you've got all these specialists that did all this study and everything else like that. People that are really specialised are the first ones to go, and people with a job that's not
so much specialised. People that are doing things that are repetitive.
Yes,
robots are good at repetitive stuff. They're not good at things like empathy. They're not good at creativity. You can't say to a robot, "Look, there's a blank sheet of paper. Can you redesign how my business should work?"
Yeah, so we could enter a golden age because let's face it, I'd rather do what I'm doing than farming, right?
We're moving from. In the past, we've got paid for delivering value.
Yep.
In the future, we're going to get paid for creating the value, which once again come back to the blockchain. You create the value at the start of the chain, and because you created it, you are making money for what you did at the beginning. The person at the end who delivers it will get a small amount for delivering it. You'll get the major event because of your level of participation.
With the concept of, can I just talk about the concept of mining Bitcoin? Now, I don't get it. I don't know what it is. You can't mine normal money. So how does that work?
It's a bad term. It was a term invented by geeks when they started. I mean, the guy who started Bitcoin, nobody knows who it is.
No one knows.
Mr. Hashimoto is the supposed name. I've met people who say they've met the guy who they believe is the guy.
Right.
So they come up with this term mining, which is really creating, finding. I have heard other terms for it. I just can't remember any off the top of my head. But you're right. Mining has that you can eventually dig into something and
It's a program. It's a program that does number crunching, to create a new prime number within this blockchain. Prime numbers, when you start off, like what's the prime number? 3, 7, right? That's a prime number, right? And as they get bigger, they're harder to find. And we've got no formula to find out a prime number in the future without doing all the number crunching and finding out.
How's that related to a Bitcoin, though?
Well,
question.
Bitcoins are
Good
comprised of prime numbers
yes,
of
And
really,
Bitcoin,
really
isn't
big
it
number.
like a concept of being money to buy things?
The reason, because a prime number, right, is so rare and hard to find as they get bigger.
Yeah.
Because there's value in that, because it's rare.
It's a bit like gold.
What's it used for?
It's used to identify the blockchain.
Okay.
It's exactly like gold.
Right.
It's rare. There's not. That's why the term mining came up.
And you
was like digging up
you've
gold.
Instead of digging it, you've got a computer program crunching numbers to find it. When you find it, done. So there's an algorithm you can do when you can buy these special computers, because they've got lots of graphic cards in them, because graphic cards can process things a lot quicker and differently to a CPU. And that's why I'm thinking when you get a quantum computer, they'll probably be able to find prime numbers really quickly, and they're just going to add whoever gets a quantum computer to mine Bitcoin.
So do you mine Bitcoins or
Yes.
you buy them?
Both.
And what's better?
Well,
Well, I mean-
depends on how much it costs you to mine it. So if you're paying a lot of electricity, I was looking into mining it when it was at $700, and the numbers didn't stack up in Adelaide, right? And I thought, this is not worth it. It's too late now. But now, funny enough, that money, if you mined it now in Adelaide, it's worth it for 5,000. However, it's harder to mine now, because each year gets harder because more people have found those numbers.
Okay.
It comes back to gold again. You know, it costs you an awful lot of money to go out and mine gold.
Now
You
it
know,
does. Not in the old days where you could just find it
No,
in
you've
Ballarat.
got to do a
and
lot
place
of
like
work now to mine gold.
Right.
Don't have to do much work to trade it. It's there, it exists. I'm now prepared to bet that the value of that piece of gold, that bit of Bitcoin, will go up, and therefore I'll buy it at that price, and I've got a number in my head at which I'll sell it. Or it will just go on forever. So it really is the equivalent. There's a very good book, I can't think of the author, but it's called Digital Gold. And
Right.
it does make that kind of analogy all the way through it.
Interesting.
And that's probably, and now that I think more about it, where the term mining came from. You know, you've got to go
Digital
and
gold,
dig
yeah.
this stuff up, and the one who digs it up is going to make the most, but there's money in it for those that trade it along the line.
So I was going to ask you, if people want to find out more about Bitcoin and making money out of Bitcoin and things, where will they start? What will they do?
Well, the internet's a really good place. There are some organisations around that can help with it. I mean, it's a brokerage thing still. But once again, the more you personally understand it, the better than rather relying on another broker. I mean, the first thing would be, I would say that if the Bitcoin, if it's the real thing, that's different to people calling various forms of coins Bitcoin. There is only one original Bitcoin. It's a bit like the Esky, you know, there's only the real Esky and then lots of things that hold ice.
Yep.
And likewise with Ethereum, there's Ether, and Ether is kind of the coin that runs across a whole lot of the programs that will run it. You can create it. There's all these different currencies you can trade in.
So Ethereum, it's quite broad based, so it could have an opportunity to become even bigger than Bitcoin, because it's not just a currency, it's other stuff as well. Is that all tied into the value of the coin?
Well, the value of the coin is, once again, how secure it is and what it represents. By way of another example, one of the projects we will be doing at the Blockchain Factory, one of my partners is off in the US and Canada at the moment getting this going, is putting a value on the environment. So that we put digital values assigned to every tree and every forest, whatever we want to protect, so that it becomes more valuable to keep a rainforest because people own bits of it than it is for someone to come and knock it over and put a palm oil plantation in it, for example.
Okay, wow.
So it's
yes,
that kind
that's
of thing
pretty
that,
cool.
you know, saying here's something that has value currently, how do we turn that into a digital asset that people can then use to trade? I can't trade trees, but I can trade tokens.
Yes, but we've sort
coins.
of The world touched on that recently with the carbon tax, didn't they?
Yes.
Where you could buy a forest
And investing in
and
forests
then
and
you
whatever.
could offset that to create pollution. Mm-hmm. And there was can you believe? Is that interesting? So they've started that. And this would make it a more seamless process because you get certain carbon credits if you get rid of the greenhouse gases. Oops.
But once again, this will become what the individuals place upon it.
Yep.
So if you say, I'm happy with my coin being worth $100 and someone comes across and says, well, I think they're worth a lot more than that, I'll offer you 150,
Yep.
you'll probably buy. So the value of that asset will continue to increase as it is.
So you could buy a forest or part of a forest with this stuff,
Yep.
and then you could actually rent out your carbon, offsetting carbon to a company. So you're actually creating value and making money out of a tree.
Correct. That could be part of it.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah,
That's
that
interesting.
But you can digitise a whole bunch of things. I mean, there's a company called BrickBlock, and what BrickBlock is doing is it's combining a whole bunch of different asset classes, including property. So saying you
can
buy
buy a brick in the
you
property,
buy one of our coins, and part of it is the value of property, part of it's the value of Bitcoin, part of it's the value. So they're combining a whole bunch of assets and saying our coin covers a lot of assets. So instead of you investing your money in property or shares or Bitcoin or whatever, these guys are saying, well, we've got some of all of the above, and therefore our coin has value. So yes, instead of having to invest money in a house, people might be able to combine together and buy bits of a house together. So you actually get started in investment much sooner than you otherwise would. Once again, it's going to generate more money, I think, to do projects around the world.
So it's going to lower that barrier to entry, essentially.
Correct.
Amazing,
Excellent.
amazing. That's been excellent. Rick, thank you for coming and sharing your knowledge with us. It's been
No,
great.
it's been my pleasure. It's been a very good
thank
morning.
you so much.
Love catching up with you.
Yeah, it's been good. So, guys, you heard it from Rick, and there's we've answered a lot of
Pretty
questions.
exciting
We've
future.
opened new ones, and Bitcoin. I think I'm going to invest a bit of money this week in a bit of stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm
I'll
sure
look
you
into
guys
it
will
for
publish a
sure.
link to the blockchain factory for me as well.
Absolutely.
Yes, we will. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, cheers, guys. Bye-bye.
Bye now.
Bye.
For everyone listening, thank you once again. Stay well, and see you next episode.
For awesome info and trending content, go to theuglytruth.blog.